the iron gate of the orphanage creaked under the weight of silence. Evening shadows stretched across the courtyard as children, who should have been laughing and chasing each other, sat frozen on the steps, eyes wide, hearts pounding. A black car had just pulled up, its headlights slicing through the dusk. Out stepped a man with a polished smile that didn't reach his eyes. He smoothed his collar, adjusted his expensive wristwatch, and strutted forward like he owned the place. His name was Salman, an uncle by blood, but a predator in truth. Every child who had heard whispers about him seemed to shrink further back. His grin was charming to strangers, but to those who knew, it was a mask stretched over cruelty. At the gate, Sister Maria, the caretaker, stood tall, though her hands trembled at her sides. "You don't belong here, Salman," she said firmly, trying to block his path. But he leaned in, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "Oh, Maria. I'm family. I've come to take what's mine." From the dormitory window upstairs, a small boy, Ayan, barely 12, watched with dread. His fists clenched the windowsill, nails digging into wood. This was the man who had turned his childhood into a prison, who had left scars that no one could see. And now, he was back. The smile never left Salman's face as he pressed forward. "Step aside. The law is on my side. Papers, signatures, it's all handled. Tonight, the boy leaves with me." Children huddled together like sparrows caught in a storm. Ayan's heart hammered against his ribs, each beat screaming no, not again. But as Salman reached for the gate, a faint sound broke the silence. Engines. Low at first, like a distant rumble of thunder rolling across the horizon. Then louder. Stronger. The ground itself seemed to vibrate as dozens of headlights appeared down the road, cutting through the gloom like fireflies born of steel and fury. The children gasped, eyes widening with awe. Sister Maria turned, relief flickering in her eyes. Because waiting just beyond the gate, lined up in silent defiance, were the bikers. Their engines growled like lions guarding their pride. And not one of them looked ready to let Salman through. Long before engines roared at that gate, Ayan's life had already been marked by shadows. He had been only 6 when his parents died in a car accident, leaving him in the reluctant care of his mother's older brother, Salman. At first, neighbors whispered sympathy. At least the boy still has family. But behind closed doors, the truth was darker. Salman was no guardian, he was a tyrant. To him, Ayan wasn't a child, he was a servant. The boy was forced to scrub floors, polish shoes, fetch tea at midnight. Every mistake, no matter how small, brought harsh punishment. Sometimes it was words sharp enough to slice through innocence, other times it was worse, slaps, kicks, nights locked in the storeroom with no blanket. The world never knew, because Salman wore his mask well. At weddings, funerals, and community meetings, he posed as the doting uncle, the grieving brother who had sacrificed his freedom to raise a child. His smile was disarming, his words dripping with sugar. People praised him for his generosity while Ayan's silent screams went unheard. One winter night, after a beating that left his lips split and his ribs aching, Ayan finally ran. He bolted into the freezing dark, barefoot, his tears stinging in the wind. Hours later, shivering and lost, he collapsed on the steps of St. Mary's orphanage. It was Sister Maria who found him. She knelt, wrapped him in her shawl, and whispered, "You're safe here, child. No one will hurt you again." For the first time, Ayan believed it. The orphanage became his haven. He learned to read without fear, to laugh without punishment, to sleep without dread of footsteps approaching in the night. The other children became his brothers and sisters, and the old wooden building with peeling paint became home. But Salman hadn't forgotten. He'd spent years plotting, weaving lies, manipulating papers until he could claim legal custody. With every signature forged, with every official bought, he built a case that painted him as a wronged uncle, desperate to reunite with his nephew. When the letter arrived at the orphanage, official-looking and stamped with the government seal, Sister Maria felt her stomach drop. The words were clear: custody granted. She fought it with appeals, letters, even protests at the district office. But Salman had money. He had influence. He had the kind of power that smirked at morality. And now, standing at the gate with that poisonous smile, he had come to collect his prize. Ian sat in the dormitory corner earlier that evening, knees pulled to his chest, whispering to himself. I can't go back. I can't. The other children tried to comfort him, but their own fear betrayed them. They knew what Salman's return meant. Sister Maria had made a phone call, her voice low, urgent, desperate. She didn't call the police, Salman's reach extended too far. Instead, she called the only people she trusted to stand between Ian and his uncle. People who believed in justice when the law failed. Men and women who had once walked roads of rebellion but had since turned their strength toward protecting the weak. The bikers. And when the night fell, their engines answered. Salman's confidence only grew as the night deepened. He stood tall at the orphanage gate, papers in hand, flashing them like a weapon. The law is clear, he sneered, waving the documents at Sister Maria. You have no authority to keep the boy from me. Behind him, the headlights of his car lit the courtyard in an eerie glow. Children shrank further into the shadows, clutching each other as though their small arms could keep Ian safe. Salman's voice carried, sharp as a whip. If you resist, you'll be arrested for obstruction. Do you want to see this place shut down? Do you want every one of these brats thrown into the streets? His threats were deliberate, each word crafted to wound. Sister Maria's lips trembled, but she refused to step aside. He is not safe with you, she whispered. Salman smirked, tilting his head. Safety is irrelevant. He's mine. And tonight, he comes home. Inside, Ian felt his chest tighten until breathing was a battle. Every memory of Salman's cruelty clawed at him, the nights without food, the bruises hidden beneath long sleeves, the endless hours of being treated less than human. He pressed his palms against his ears, but nothing could drown out the sound of his uncle's voice calling him property. For years, Ian had believed no one would ever stand up for him. The law had failed. Neighbors had turned a blind eye. Adults had nodded politely at Salman's lies. And now, the monster had come back, stronger than ever, backed by signatures and seals that carried more weight than truth. The children whispered in fear. Some began to cry. Sister Maria silently prayed. And Salman, sensing victory, adjusted his cufflinks with smug precision, as though the boy's fate was already sealed. But then, the rumble grew louder. The engines were no longer a distant warning, they were here, filling the night with thunder. Tires crunched against gravel. Chrome gleamed under the orphanage lights. Salman turned toward the gate, irritation flashing in his eyes. What is this circus? He muttered. He didn't know yet. He didn't understand. Justice was coming for him, on two wheels. The night exploded with sound. Dozens of bikes rolled up the narrow street, their headlights burning through the dark like an army of stars descending from the heavens. Engines snarled and growled in unison, the rhythm of rebellion and protection blending into something primal. The children at the orphanage windows gasped in awe, never had they seen such a sight. At the head of the formation rode a man they all called Rider Khan, broad-shouldered, with weathered hands that had once known violence but now carried only purpose. His leather jacket bore the emblem of his brotherhood, a winged skull wreathed in flames, symbolizing that they lived not for destruction but for shielding the innocent. When the bike screeched to a halt before the gate, Salman's smirk faltered for the first time. He squared his shoulders, forcing a laugh. What is this? He scoffed. Street thugs? You think motorcycles will scare me? Rider Khan swung off his bike, his boots hitting the ground with a heavy thud. The air around him seemed to thicken as he removed his helmet, revealing eyes that burned with conviction. He stepped forward, joined by a dozen men and women behind him, faces hardened by past battles, softened only by the sight of the children peering nervously from the windows. Sister Maria's relief was almost visible. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Thank God you came." Salman straightened his tie and held up the papers. You've made a mistake showing up here. This is none of your business. Legally, the boy is mine. Rider Khan didn't even glance at the documents. He looked only at Ian, who stood frozen on the steps, his eyes wide, his small fists shaking. With a voice deep as the engines that had brought him here, Khan said, "A child is never property. You lost any right to call yourself family the moment you heard him." The other bikers closed ranks, forming a wall of leather and steel between Salman and the orphanage gate. The air smelled of gasoline and defiance, the ground vibrating beneath their boots. Each of them carried the weight of past sins, but tonight, they had come to make sure a boy didn't live the nightmare they once had. One of the bikers, a woman named Zara, her hair braided tight, eyes sharp as daggers, stepped forward. "We've heard what you did," she said, her voice cutting like glass. "The bruises. The nights he starved. The tears he cried into a pillow no one bothered to check. You call yourself his guardian? You're nothing but a coward hiding behind paper." Salman's grin flickered, but he quickly composed himself. "You people have no authority here. The police will hear of this. Do you want to be arrested? Is that it?" The bikers laughed, not mockingly, but with the kind of unshaken certainty that rattled him more than anger ever could. Ryder Khan leaned closer, his voice calm, deliberate. "Let them come. We don't fear cages. We've lived through worse. But this boy? He won't spend another night under your roof. Not while we stand." For the first time in years, Ian felt something he had never known before when facing his uncle, hope. He clutched the wooden railing of the steps, eyes brimming with tears. He whispered so softly that only the children beside him heard, "They came for me." And outside, the engines roared again, like a thunderstorm ready to strike. The tension at the gate was thick enough to choke on. The bikers stood in unyielding silence, their presence alone enough to make the ground tremble. Salman's polished smile cracked ever so slightly, but arrogance was his shield, and he clung to it like a weapon. He waved the custody papers once more. "All of you, move aside. The law is on my side, and you can't stop me. Do you want me to call the authorities? Do you want to see every one of you dragged away in chains?" Ryder Khan tilted his head, eyes narrowing as though he were staring into the soul of a man he had seen 1,000 times before. "I've known men like you," he said slowly, his voice low and deliberate. "Men who think signatures and seals excuse cruelty. Men who wear fake smiles to hide their poison. But let me tell you something, Salman, no ink on paper will ever outweigh the truth carved into this boy's heart." The bikers stepped closer, their boots striking the ground in perfect rhythm. The children inside the orphanage pressed their faces against the glass, hearts pounding as the night unfolded like a scene from a film. Salman tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. "You think you're heroes? You're criminals. Society doesn't want you, and neither does the law." Zara stepped forward, her voice cutting through the dark. "Maybe society doesn't want us. But society also doesn't want little boys broken by men like you. We fight for the ones no one else will fight for." Salman's confidence faltered, but he wasn't done. With a sharp whistle, 2 men emerged from the black car parked behind him, thugs, muscles bulging beneath cheap leather jackets, their faces blank with cruelty. They moved toward the bikers, cracking knuckles, smirking as if violence was inevitable. The children gasped, Sister Maria's hand flew to her mouth, and for a moment, it seemed chaos would erupt. Then the bikers acted. Engines roared as several riders revved their bikes, headlights flaring like blazing suns. The sound alone was enough to make the thugs hesitate, but Ryder Khan didn't wait. He stepped forward, chest to chest with Salman, his voice thunderous. "You will not touch him again." Salman's eyes narrowed, his mask slipping to reveal the rage beneath. "He's mine. Do you hear me? Mine." Khan's reply was steady, unshaken. "No. He is his own. And tonight, he chooses freedom." He turned to Ian, who stood frozen in the doorway, trembling but watching with eyes wide. "Son," Khan called gently, his tone softening in a way that silenced the night. "You don't have to hide anymore. Tell him. Tell us. Do you want to go with this man?" The world seemed to stop. Every child held their breath. Even Salman froze, certain of the answer. After all, fear had always kept the boy silent. But then, Ayan spoke. His voice cracked, but it carried like a bell. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "I don't want to go. I don't want him. I just want to be safe." The orphanage courtyard fell into stunned silence. Salman's face contorted with fury. "You ungrateful little," he lunged forward, hand raised to strike. But he never reached. Ryder Khan's arm shot out like iron, catching him mid-swing. The impact of Khan's grip alone made Salman stagger backward. The bikers surged forward as one, a wall of leather, chrome, and unwavering resolve. The thugs, seeing the storm they had walked into, backed away instantly, their bravado crumbling under the sheer force of the Brotherhood. "Touch him again," Khan growled, his voice echoing like rolling thunder, "and it will be the last mistake you ever make." The crowd of children erupted into cheers, their fear melting into triumph. Sister Maria's tears streamed freely, her prayers answered in flesh and steel. Salman, pale and shaking now, tried to collect himself. But the power he had always relied upon, fear, was gone. Stripped away. His mask had shattered before the eyes of everyone present. And the bikers? They didn't celebrate. They simply stood in silence, guardians carved from shadow and loyalty, their engines rumbling softly like a heartbeat of justice. For the first time in his life, Ayan didn't feel alone. The courtyard had changed. Where there had been fear and trembling moments ago, now there was warmth, hope flickering in the night like a flame refusing to die. Salman's threats crumbled into empty mutters as his thugs dragged him back toward the black car, defeated. His once perfect smile was gone, replaced by the bitter face of a man stripped of power. The children, who had once cowered from his very presence, now stood tall, their small shoulders lifted with pride. They had witnessed something they would never forget. The night evil was stopped at their gate. Ryder Khan turned to Sister Maria, his voice softer now. "He won't come back. Not while we breathe." Her hands clasped together, tears glistening in her eyes. "How can we ever repay you?" Khan shook his head. "We don't do this for repayment. We do this so kids like Ayan never have to feel alone again." He then crouched before the boy. Ayan's small hands shook as he reached out, but Khan steadied him with a firm, gentle grip. "You fought tonight," Khan said, his voice low, meant only for him. "You spoke the truth, even when you were scared. That makes you braver than most men I've known." For the first time in years, Ayan smiled, not the forced smile of survival, but a real one, fragile and pure. The children cheered around him, hugging him, lifting him as though he had won a great battle. And in a way, he had. The bikers returned to their machines, engines purring once more. One by one, they put on their helmets, the night claiming them again. Ryder Khan mounted his bike last, looking back only once. His eyes lingered on Ayan, as if to say, "We will always be watching." The roar of their departure echoed through the streets, fading into the distance until only silence remained. But it wasn't the silence of fear anymore, it was the silence of peace. That night, as Ayan lay in his bed, safe within the walls of the orphanage, he whispered to himself, "I'm free." And for the first time, he believed it. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe for more powerful stories of hope, courage, and justice.